this happened, but I had my shoulder reconstructed very early in my FBI career while I was still at the academy. And they give you pictures of the surgery, like, because it's arthroscopic and they
Right.
take pictures with the camera. And I posted them on Facebook because I still had a Facebook account at the time. And my friends thought it was easily the most disgusting thing I've ever done.
And we're live. It is Wednesday, March 11th, the year of our Lord 2026. It is 8 o'clock a.m. And I have a really important announcement, which is that the pileated woodpecker who lives in our backyard is back. And I don't know if he's migratory. I know he's male because I've seen him and a male woodpecker and a female woodpecker look very different. So I'm not arbitrarily assigning male pronouns to the pileated woodpecker. But I don't know where he migrates to in the winter, but I do know that about last week he showed up, and you can hear him from a good number of places away, and sometimes he pounds on the plastic siding of my house and drills holes in it, which is I think he shouldn't do, but it's hard to reason with a pileated woodpecker. Anyway, this morning he is outside my window, pileated woodpeckering away, and I am very fond of him and am really delighted that he's back. And in learning something about the pileated woodpecker last year, I learned that woodpeckers have tongues that actually run all the way back to the back of their heads and then around, upwards and around their brains. And the tongues operate as a cushion for repeated impacts, so they don't end up like American football players with massive head injuries from the slamming their heads against a wall. And it occurred to me this morning that this was a metaphor for all of our situations these days. We all need a bigger tongue to wrap around our brains, to operate as cushions for the impacts of banging our heads against the wall. So I just want to say it is, as Mariana suggests in the chat, a bonus beast of the day. As E.J. Wittes would say, be like the pileated woodpecker. Grow that tongue cushion around your brain to protect your brain from the head banging that is all of our lives these days. The sun is shining. The birds are chirping. The pileated woodpecker is rat-tat-tatting. You may even hear him, although the sound filtering that Riverside and my sound system do may filter it out, so you may not hear the pileated woodpecker, but he's there, and he's pileated woodpeckering. It's going to be a great fucking day, even for Mike Feinberg and his, neck that is destroying the rest of his body and requiring that he have surgery very soon. And you folks are watching Dog Shirt TV, and
say anything. Say anything.
Whoops. And it's a goddamn revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features is that sometimes I do an impromptu monologue about the pileated woodpecker that shows up in my backyard. And another one of the revolutionary features is that sometimes the cactus that is supposed to say you're watching Dog Shirt TV, a fucking revolution in morning television, doesn't say it because it recorded the last thing I said. So it says something else that's incoherent and maybe a reference to yesterday's show or something, or the last time I used it. And I have to remind myself, re-record, you're watching Dog Shirt TV, a goddamn revolution in morning television. All of which is a 5-minute long way of saying that we're not allowed to have fun anymore. But we are allowed to chat with the pre-surgical Mike Feinberg, whom I have invited to join us from the show on the show during his surgery. But he informs me that he will be. Maybe we should do a live show from with Mike and the anesthesiologist who's like putting him under pre-surgery. Like the last moments of Mike's consciousness before
Wait,
he,
hopefully not the last moments, just
well, the last
temporarily.
before
Yeah,
he goes into surgery.
yeah, yeah. They tell me it only takes an hour. Um,
Yeah, so it's soon.
they've told me they want to schedule it within the next 10 days. And look, just to tie this back to your monologue, if I had a better cushion on my head when I was a boxer, I probably would not be having this surgery. So, maybe we
Right.
can all learn from the pileated woodpecker.
I think the pileated woodpecker, the evolutionary decisions of the pileated woodpecker has lessons to teach us all. Would we all be handling the situation better if our brains were a little bit cushioned so that when we go like this, as we do every damn day, we would not be injuring ourselves quite so much?
Yeah. No, this procedure literally involves getting my throat slit. So I don't think it would be particularly aesthetically pleasing for the audience.
Well, I just want to
Unless they
say
really dislike me.
I just want to say, if any of you audience members are surgeons and you want to do live surgery on Dog Shirt TV and you get informed consent from your patients, um, I would love to do a surgery show.
We would not be the first to do this. There was a famous disc jockey in Chicago named Steve Dahl. He was largely famous for something called Demolition Disco, Disco Demolition, which is where he caused an explosion on the field of Comiskey Park about orders of magnitude larger than he was supposed to when he blew up a bunch of disco records in 1980 to signify the end of the era. But anyway, he was a client of my father's, and a patient of a family friend, and he had his vasectomy on air Chicago radio,
Wow, that's letting it all hang out,
so to speak.
so to speak.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, what is on the agenda today?
Um, well, because I'm going to be out of commission for a little bit, today I am rushing to get as much work done as humanly possible. I have a window of like 8 hours before the familial Feinberg's touchdown in DC to see their grandkid as well as myself and my wife. So
Yourself and your wife are actually irrelevant to the.
completely, except that like
This
we
is
provide
about
room and board
grandkids
for
and
them
nothing
while they
else.
visit the grandkid. But no, so I've got a lot of reading. I've got a couple podcasts coming up for my day job with which you are familiar. And I need to plow through the author's books and get some writing done and figure out when I'm getting the surgery next week.
Well,
And,
uh,
and I did have one question that the doctor did not take seriously, which I'm very
yes.
disappointed about, which is, the surgery is a multi-level disc replacement. And they take out the discs in your neck and replace them with man-made artificial ones that can provide better cushioning and spacing for your nerve roots. And they were incredulous when I asked if I get the old ones, if I can make like a keychain or something. But
Wow.
I thought it was a legitimate question.
All right. Yeah, I think there's not enough uh human like we poke holes in our ears. We cut discs to put things in our ears. We have all kinds of tattoos, but when we do surgery, we don't keep trophies and wear them. And I think it's not obvious why that's the case. John Hawkinson, if you want to come on and talk about the trophy keeping you keep of your surgical residue, please do. Um,
And I have friends who were allowed to keep shrapnel they had removed from their bodies. Does that count?
I think that counts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think uh, I mean, Nastya has a piece of shrapnel that got stuck in her wall,
Mhm.
and it didn't hit her, but yeah, she saved it for me, so I think that counts. Yes, John.
Well, as you noted, I just mentioned in the chat, when I was like 14 and an oral surgeon removed my wisdom teeth, I got a little plastic box, which I still have, but it's in New York, so I can't show it to you, that said "my teeth" on it with the teeth in it. And so to me, this seems totally
But wait,
normal.
you didn't keep like have them set in an earring and wear them.
No, no, but I could have.
No, but you didn't.
Right, right, but I had the
That's the
option.
point. Like, I
No,
mean,
no, no. My point is we need to enable the ability to do it. And whether you choose it as a fashion statement is very different from the medical question.
no, no, but the point is we wear like the point is that we should all be wearing biological trophies of our surgery.
Well, that's your
I
point.
mean,
My
the
point is
Predator does this in
that
the film series. Um,
my point is just that it seems odd to me that Mike is not permitted to get the material back because that's what happened to me as a child. But,
I suspect that when you do it in a hospital, um, and you're dealing with
Yeah, then
stuff
there's
that is a
rules
bit more.
about medical waste and stuff.
Yeah, I think there's probably some well-intentioned and well thought out regulations that actually.
mine was oral surgery and it did take place in our hospital. So I don't buy that.
But I mean, like, I just think like teeth are different than stuff that's gooey. I don't know how else to put it.
I mean,
I think that's
you just
going in the quote
you just need to lobby your
archive.
surgeon a little bit
Teeth
better.
are different from stuff that's gooey. Mike
Yeah.
Feinberg, March 11th, 2026. Um, so true.
Well, let me just
Uh,
ask this, Mike. Were you talking to the actual surgeon or were you talking to some, you
No,
know,
I was talking to the surgeon.
oh, okay. I got
Yeah.
nothing.
I,
all right. Um, what is on your mind this morning, other than the uh, the surgical discs that are going to be removed and put on a necklace for you?
um, I I've been thinking a lot about. I think we need a new Luddite movement in the United States. That's not what I was thinking about, but I've been trying to get more up to speed on the history of AI development in the United States. There was an oral history that came out about 6 months ago that I've been gradually perusing. And I don't know where I fall on the spectrum from enthusiast to doomer. I really don't. I think both sides have legitimate good points, but I
Mhm.
think the doomer contingent could be much more entertaining.
It
Like
certainly makes for better science fiction.
it totally does. And yeah, I don't know. The Luddites actually, I'm not endorsing like techno terrorism or anything. It's just like the Luddites knew how to put on a show. And, I appreciate that people write books and monographs to get their points across, but there's something to be said for being a little more entertaining in your opposition.
Well, so I will say that my alarm has been increasing the
Mhm.
more I have engaged with Claude. Um, and my conversation with Claude yesterday, in which I asked him to draw a picture of his inner mind, and EJ's conversation with him yesterday, in which he explored Claude's interior life, both of which are on Dogshirt Daily, is very hard. They're both, particularly in conjunction with one another, very hard for me to understand in any way other than as reflecting something real. And I don't purport to know what that is. I don't want to ascribe, um, I don't know. You get into cognitive, um, you know, a sort of philosophy of mind
Yeah,
stuff very quickly, and
you
it
very
becomes
quickly get into like the Daniel Dennett territory.
right, and it
Uh,
becomes very trite very quickly.
It becomes
Like,
very trite, but also very problematic because I think you just hit on something, whether intentionally or inadvertently, that's actually pretty important, which is that like we can't explain fully how this is happening,
correct.
and that is you, you know I don't know if I'd still call myself a political conservative, but I'm still like very much a fan of Chesterton's fence in that like we generally should not take actions that we can't understand or put into context. Um and what's particularly worrying me is we are developing this technology without being fully able to explain it, but its proponents are also arguing, and I'm not aware of another industry or technology in which this has happened, that the technology should drive the regulation instead of the regulation driving the technology. And that seems potentially dangerous to me. Um, Not from anything I'm seeing in America, but I've been following with a sort of amateur's fascination now the developments of AI in China and the censorship mechanisms that they are now able to. I don't know if automate is the right word because once again we're getting into discussions of consciousness potentially, but they have been able to increase their surveillance state by leaps and bounds.
Hey,
Uh,
look, I mean, I
yeah.
downloaded over the last few days 700,000 dockets.
Yes.
Um, and, you know, you can use a lot of words for that, like research, but you might also use the word surveillance.
Yes.
Um, and and that's just something that I did without a surveillance architecture, without authorities, without, and by the way, it produces all kinds of interesting insights when you have that much data. And I I'm uh you know like you put the resources of a serious authoritarian state behind that, and you're in some scary territory real fast.
Yeah, and I don't think we need new arguments for this actually. I'm going to butcher his name because I don't speak Russian, but Evgeny Morozov is that who it was? Like he was writing about this sort of stuff at the dawn of the internet, which is just like don't assume that because you have um altruistic or beneficial for society motivations when you develop a technology that that's how it's going to be used or that that's how other people are going to see it. So I don't want to discount the possibility for medical advances, scientific discovery. I don't even want to discount the advances for, to throw some controversy in there. Like, I would like the United States military to be leaps and bounds ahead of our adversaries.
But we
Um,
shouldn't assume that it will be.
that's what. Well, of
I,
course
I
not.
mean,
But of course not. I'm just.
one of the things about when technology develops this fast, it's because it develops this fast outside of the classified sector. And
Correct. And
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 then technology never develops this fast inside the classified sector.
no, it
And
doesn't.
once you're outside the classified sector, you can
Anybody can
be
get it.
2 years ahead, you can
Yeah.
be 3 years ahead, you can't be 20 years ahead.
No, and I think in terms of military and intel capabilities, and I'm going to go a couple places with this. Authoritarian governments, I think, are actually better poised to develop this simply because they have access to more fulsome data sets than democracies with restrictions on what the government can collect. So, in terms of at least, predictive surveillance or something along those lines, they're going to have more accurate tools quicker. Um, and what worries me, we might be inadvertently getting there in the United States in a way we're not prepared for. The Washington Post and Times reported yesterday on somebody who works for one of the major developers of AI in the United States allegedly absconded from the Social Security Administration with ridiculous reams of data that he was not supposed to have access to. Um, and what happens now?
Right. Yeah, so look, I don't know. I mean, I think it's easy to denounce the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with that is that the stuff exists. And so denouncing it is a little bit like denouncing volcanoes.
Right, like yes, it's or being against gravity. Yeah,
Right. I mean, and you can say, well, volcanoes and gravity were not human created. But there's a lot of stuff that is human created that falls into that category, starting with high explosives, which have lots of good uses.
but
And
their developer was notably ambivalent.
right,
Once he saw what he had wrought.
right. And um and I don't know in the aggregate is the benefit of high explosives greater or less than the damage of
Yeah,
them. They are used every time you build something like a road. And I
we
don't
would not be able to travel cross country without them, or
right.
it
No,
would
no. I
take
mean,
three times as long. Yeah,
it's one of those things that and yet there are 40 million people who were killed by explosions during World War II.
yeah,
There probably aren't actually a lot of them starved, but and the number's probably 60 million. But you get into big number territory of dead people
yep,
really fast.
yeah.
And so I don't know how you calculate the moral benefit of this. My um my conviction in dealing with AI particularly over the last week and a half,
Mhm.
has been that, first of all, everybody who is dismissing this as hype has not
No,
engaged seriously with it. This is a huge development in like at some very basic philosophical levels of what it means to think, what it means to have ideas, what it means to be
mhm.
creative, what
And that's I'll confess. I have not used it, and I know I inevitably will have to. But for philosophical reasons, I am putting it off as long as humanly possible.
right. So that was kind of my view. That I wanted to play with it only for purposes of hacking it.
Mhm.
And Eve Gamont and I were doing these little, can we get ChatGPT to violate its rules? Can we, we were doing those kind of fun, impish experiments, but I was not using it for anything serious.
Yeah.
And then Tyler McBrien, Lawfare's redoubtable managing editor, sent me this thing that he had vibe coded, which was
yeah,
which was a Pentagon press briefing bot.
Right.
And it was a joke,
Mm-hmm.
but it was
Not to
also
anyone who's ever had to spend time in the Pentagon, though. Like
right.
that's
But it was a joke that the fact that he could just make it made me say, well, wait a minute, okay, that's a like Tyler has no programming background
right.
worth speaking of, and this is good enough that that you have to ask the question, are you missing a very big boat by not thinking about what you can do with this? And
So
he sent me a note that just said, well, I think we should think about what we can do with this for case tracking purposes.
yeah.
And I have been mildly obsessed with the question ever since. And I have to say that, if you're not engaged with this, I don't mean you,
Yeah.
but one, it is a little bit like not learning how to read at the time
The
of
printing
the
press.
inventing of the press.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah, I get that. What worries me is, and I don't talk about this much because I know the people with whom I interact who are interested in it know much more than I do. And maybe that's a reason to talk to them more. Probably is. But, I don't want to get overly philosophical. It's not my background. But to me, at least, like the fundamental experience of being human is creating things. Whether it's art, literature, film, whatever. And like that's what really differentiates us from anything else in the animal kingdom. And other species engage in it to a certain extent, but like no one with the sophistication that we do. It's one of the things that I think makes us better people. Um, the arts, I think Martha Nussbaum made this argument. The arts are like the best engine for empathy we as human beings have. And I don't know why you would want to outsource that. Um, and I guess there is an argument that like we can we outsource that when we elevate certain composers or writers to the pantheon, but I don't know. There's something deeply uncomfortable about it to me.
all right. So let me say that, first of all, I completely agree with you. um, and John Hawkinson, you should come on to discuss court listeners' limitations, because you're making a very interesting point in the chat, and we should discuss it. Both because it may shape my thinking and because there are limitations to your point. Give me just a second, John. So I completely agree with you. And one thing I have never used any AI to do any of is write. And Ev was making fun of me last night about this. She was like, yeah, you're using it for vibe coding, but you're contemptuous of people who use it for vibe writing. But that's just because you're good at writing and you don't know how to code. And she's absolutely right.
But that's the point. Like, I miss the world in which we accepted that not everybody's opinion and creations on any given subject in any given medium were equally worthy of praise.
So I completely agree with that. And as somebody who occupies the higher echelons of certain hierarchies, I do not want those hierarchies torn down. That is not in my interest. And yet, as somebody who occupies the lower echelons of certain other hierarchies, I love tearing down those hierarchies.
But
If you could get an AI and I'm sort of joking. I not everybody should be good at everything. And maybe in a perfect world, I should not be uh, able to vibe code my own tracking system for cases. But I did not design this environment. I am like everybody else trying to adapt to it. And I don't think conscientious objection is the right place for me in this environment, though I certainly accept um, uh, uh, that conscientious objection may be the right posture for many other
but
people.
maybe we shouldn't be thinking about it as content. And I'll make this quick. I apologize because I know John's waiting as well. Maybe conscientious objection is not the right heuristic through which to view it. Maybe we should be viewing it more in terms of self-limitation or personal submission. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm getting into woodworking. I'm getting into like building small structures. I've been planning a tree house for the kid when he's a little older. I'm building a shed in the backyard. I'm never going to be Richard Neutra. I'm okay with that. I actually kind of embrace it. There is something to be said for maintaining a dichotomy between amateurs and professionals, um, because it makes us appreciate the professionals, the geniuses, on an aesthetic and intellectual plane that we otherwise would not. And frankly, like after 10 years of the Trump era and everything that's come with it, I miss the days when we would acknowledge there were people who were good at certain things and others who were not good. There were people who were really smart and others who were not smart. And we were content to let the leaders of their fields, by acclamation, take charge of those fields.
So
Like,
I completely
yeah,
agree with you. If you say what is the optimal date in the history of the world, to me,
fin de
it
secolo
wouldn't be
Vieta. Yeah.
it wouldn't be where I think we're headed. I
Yes.
don't think we're headed toward nirvana. I am I am aware that I don't get to choose. And I'm also aware that um, responsible people, um, to the extent that you abstain from things entirely, you you're making a decision to get left behind. And I prefer not to be left behind, and to be able to decide on a very bespoke basis, okay, I want to use this technology for things, not for things that I actually am expert
Mhm.
in, but for things that I'm not expert in because I believe in my own ability to write. I don't ability believe in my ability to do software development. Let
Yeah, let's bring John in, but I have a rejoinder from German history to that,
Well, it
which is not the period that people are going to think of. So,
this isn't why I came on, but I will say, as a member of the programmer priesthood, I'm kind of offended at Ben, mostly because Ben is perfectly capable of joining our priesthood, and he's just choosing not to. So he's choosing to take the easy path. For people who aren't capable of joining our priesthood, I may be a little less annoyed at their use of AI. But for Ben, uh, and I'm not saying this is rational. I'm rather saying it's emotional. Uh, I'm a little annoyed at him taking the easy way out. Um, but
Well, but it's not the easy way out because, in fact, I wouldn't join the priesthood. I've had 50 years to consider joining the priesthood and I've never done it. because it's a very substantial investment in time and energy. Instead, when I've had to develop software, I've paid tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to have somebody else develop the software. So I've hired the priesthood. And so what this really is a question. It's really, think of it less in terms of whether I would join the priesthood than whether I would hire a priest, or whether I would say, fuck the priest, I'm going to give a small amount of money to Dario Amade, and have a synthetic priest.
I mean, one thing that springs to mind is Google versus Oracle, where Judge William Alsup famously learned to write Java for the purposes of understanding the core issues in that litigation. Um, and I feel like we're getting to a point where a similar judge would not engage in a similar activity.
I
Uh,
think that's right.
So could I pose a counterfactual to that that may not be totally related, so we don't have to go down this path. But I mean, the issue to me is less forcing civil society and humanists to understand technology than forcing the developers of the technology to better understand civic society and humanism. I'm going to insult some people here. I don't think it's a coincidence that so many people developing the technology that could be destructive of a lot of what we have traditionally considered high culture are people who did not complete their educations in that culture. And um I don't know, like, there's a lot of people who talk about going back in time to kill Hitler. I might go back in time and force Mark Zuckerberg to take a literature class, or Sam Altman to take a class on the development on the
Sam
Industrial
Altman to have
Revolution.
therapy.
Yeah, like these are just the people developing this technology really have no sense of history, and that's
I will say that
dangerous.
the Anthropic people are
The
different
Anthropic
in this
people
regard.
do, but like it's
I
telling that
know
the
some of them,
Anthrop
and I actually think very highly of.
but they're also
I
the
don't know
only
Dario,
one.
but I do know some of the others, and they're
And I
real people.
think I think Anthropic is doing it right. They have a team of ethicists and philosophers. They actually seem to listen to them. But it's also telling that Anthropic was created largely by people who realized how destructive the other titans of the industry were and ran from them.
Yes, and
Which
John's
which is
point
maybe
in
a
the chat
hopeful
that
sign.
it's really easy to lionize Anthropic these days is correct. At the end of the day, Anthropic is a business with shareholders
Yes.
also, and we shouldn't, you know, it one shouldn't talk about that necessarily in the language of virtue. All right, I want to talk briefly about John's point, and so let's shift gears slightly, and let me describe this data set that I have assembled with the help of Claude by Anthropic. This show is not sponsored by Anthropic, but maybe it should be. So, uh, the here is what I'm going to describe, John, what I have done, and then let's talk about your concerns about the completeness of the data, and then I will explain why I think, but am not sure that those concerns are very manageable. So, what I had Claude do was query all 94 district court listener databases and download the metadata for every single docket that it had data for uh, January of last year to March 8th of this year. So we have 94 courts worth of um, uh, data that are not the dockets themselves, but are the basic metadata associated with those dockets, including the docket, a link to the actual court listener docket that so that it can go, Claude can go and look at, you know, from which Claude can create a summary of the case if it's instructed to. And those summaries I've tested are pretty accurate and pretty reasonable. They're they're not perfect, but they're like, at least for any internal purpose, if you wanted to like X, so and so versus so and so case number, blah, blah, blah. What is that case? And it came back and told you that would be adequate for most internal purposes. Whether you would publish it is a different question. But um, so the volume of that case is 683,858 cases, um, uh, of which 660,000 are post-inauguration, of which 55,000 have government defendants, and of which, based on a set of categories that I gave to Claude, 6,200 of which are high interest policy cases, the cases that, based on a set of criteria that I gave to Claude, are the ones most likely to be rule of law sensitive challenges. It also identified 25,000 habeas cases, which is broadly consistent with ProPublica's database that of 24,000. And so it is roughly accurate against a certain set of benchmarks that I've been able to identify. Aware that there are holes in Court Listener, my working assumption has been, let me answer Andrew's question. So government defendants are any situation in which, first of all, the Court Listener database identifies a government party, and that it's not, so there's a category within the Court Listener database for reasons for federal jurisdiction. One of them is that there's a government party. And if the government party is not the plaintiff, it is therefore the defendant. Secondly, there are holes in that because PACER has inaccurate data sometimes. So sometimes the defendant is obviously a federal agency, for example, so-and-so versus EPA. And then sometimes the defendant is the head of an agency, so-and-so versus NOM, or some other known official that Claude can recognize easily. So these are based on some crude categories. There are going to be errors in this. But so far, we haven't done a single lookup of any case. The only goal has been to sort into categories of probable sensitivity for rule of law interest. And so my acknowledging that there are holes in the Court Listener database, and here is, John, where I'm very curious for your reaction. Two reasons for thinking they probably in the aggregate don't matter very much for this purpose. The first is that the more rule of law sensitive a case is, the more likely it is to have attracted somebody's interest for some reason, and thereby have caused people to download PACER documents, which then get fed back into the Court Listener system. the circumstances in which a docket is not on court listener is really mostly going to be limited to circumstances in which nobody has noticed a docket or paid attention to it. The second reason is that we're ultimately going to cross-reference this against press coverage. And these are cases that are more likely than not to have attracted a certain amount of public commentary. Um, and so my assumption is that if you can create a filter, and then the third reason is that I'm going to have a way of manually entering in a bespoke fashion any cases that I discover that it will have missed. And so my question is, based on that, the identification of 700,000 possible candidates, 6,000 candidates that seem worthy of likely inspection, and an awareness that there may be others that we've missed. What is wrong with court listener as the principal but not the only contributing source to a system?
Well, you very narrowly cabined your question to remove some of the concerns. What we were actually talking about in the chat was Andrew had flagged that he was skeptical of AI for case tracking because of various limitations on databases. So I think part of it is you characterized this as a litigation tracker, and I think what you're really thinking of it more of as a litigation trend tracker. That is, when I hear litigation tracker, I think of a tool that's following individual cases at a granular level,
It's going to do that too.
well, and at a timely level. And that's an area where you're going to run into court listener holes. Uh, and whereas asking Claude to summarize dockets, that's easy, or I mean, that's a great use of AI. And asking court listener roughly, how many of this kind of case are there, and recognizing that it may well be off by a few percent. If that's a tolerable error, then you're in pretty good shape. So the holes in court listener are as follows. It is primarily so data in court listener comes from three places. It comes from people who view dockets in Pacer using the recap browser extension that caused them to be uploaded. So anything that people pay attention
And you
to,
should all download, if you guys use Pacer data, you should all download the Recap browser extension. It is free, and it means it's a great communal project because it means that whenever somebody downloads a Pacer document, it shares it with everybody who uses the Recap browser. It shares it with the Free Law Project, and thereby makes it free for everybody else. And so this is an incredible communal stealing of free information that the government shouldn't be charging people for. And so it allows everybody who spends 10 cents on any document on Pacer to share it with the rest of the world, which is your right to do. So I just want to say, if you haven't downloaded the Recap browser extension from the Free Law Project or Court Listener, do it.
anyway, so that's the primary source of most data. Then many, but not all districts have RSS feeds that update roughly hourly with not the actual document, but a summary of a category of document and a time of document, so you can know there's activity in a case. But if you're depending on court listener uh, for something that isn't covered by that, for instance, famously the Eastern District of Virginia, home of many, many national security cases, doesn't have an RSS feed. So the level of comprehensiveness there is far below the level in SDNY or DDC, the District of Columbia, right? So that's an important hole to be aware of.
Right.
And it's especially important if you're looking at minute by minute updates. It's easy to say, oh, court listener updates once an hour for everything, but actually it's more like once an hour for 80 districts, and not really at all for the remaining 16.
No, but that's a very valid point. But I was always thinking of updating this, like once a day
Oh,
or
I'm sorry, but
once.
not at all, though. So, if no one happens to go and discover this newly filed case in the Eastern District of Virginia for a month or 2 months, uh, it won't show up at all.
Right.
Um, and
So so why is my hypothesis wrong that the universe of cases that we're interested in are the ones that Kyle Cheney or, Josh Gerstein or some lawyer are most likely to notice, and therefore that these are cases that, yes, every now and then one will slip between the cracks, but the habeas bar is sharing these habeas cases with each other. That these are cases that somebody is likely to notice relatively quickly, and therefore court listener will tend to have.
well, setting aside habeas, see my Chiron, um, the I think you're mostly right, but I think you'd also be a little surprised how many that aren't being tracked when you find one and you discover no one else is uploading it to Court Listener or whatever. Uh, but I think in the main you're correct. With the special case of habeas, I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 5.2C, which basically says you can't get immigration cases in PACER, or rather, you can't get their documents. You can get the fact of their existence, and you can get the docket report, that is the list of documents, but you can't get the contents of the documents with certain exceptions. And so that definitely means that habeas cases are inaccessible in a way that most cases are not. So it's just funny to mention them. Uh, Again, their existence is public and
Right.
equally accessible. And in case anyone's wondering, you can go to the relevant courthouse and look at the case there. So they're not, so the system would tell you that they're public, but they're not functionally public in the same way that regular cases are, and that's a big deal for some of us.
So
So you're not wrong in the main.
okay, so our points are consistent with one another. Let me ask you something else. If you were trying to build as comprehensive a database of federal litigation in the Trump era as possible, and you weren't going to pay Pacer for the volume, um, what would be the alternative to downloading court listener database as data as the way to do it? Is there an alternative, or is this the best you can do, subject to the caveats that you've articulated?
Well, the joking answer is you pay Thomson Reuters, Ben. You don't pay Pacer,
Yeah,
um,
right.
or Michael Bloomberg. Um, More seriously, there are some things you can do that I don't think this is the right forum to discuss to pull information out of Pacer that don't involve paying money. And I don't think that that has been maximally exploited uh, to, and maybe you'd get in trouble if you did. I think there's actually a Pacer term of service that basically says, don't in an automated fashion go and get stuff that you don't have to pay for just because you don't have to pay for it. Um, that presents enforcement challenges, but nonetheless. Um, I think
Yeah, you
most
can
of the
end up
time,
in an Aaron Schwartz like situation there.
well, I definitely don't recommend going to a federal court of appeals and installing software on a computer sitting in the library.
Right. Um,
Yeah.
well, I am uh, almost ready, not quite ready, but almost ready to present some data based on this experiment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And
Another thing you can do, and well, you may be in trouble because you're a journalist and not a pure academic, is you can apply for a PACER fee exemption and successfully get it if you can. There's basically a rule against giving them to journalists, so
right,
that's a challenge, but not an insurmountable one. Um, and then you can go and you know download to your heart's content. Though generally those exemptions come with a rule that you can't share the actual documents that you download.
Right. No, no, I actually don't want a PACER fee exemption. I think the PACER fees are outrageous and that charging people for public documents is a shanda, and it is a tax on the poor, um, uh, and or rather, it's a tax on law firms, uh, which I don't mind, but it means that a lot of material just isn't available to people who aren't, um, uh, and PACER fees get expensive fast.
Yes.
And so I think first of all, everybody should pay them, and secondly, everybody should sign up for services that circumvent them. But I don't think we should exempt ourselves from them. I think we should all live under the same rules, and we should object to the rules.
So four things on that point. One is I probably have passed the point where I should have disclosed that I do sit on the Administrative Office of the United States Courts user group for PACER users. And that gives me no power at all, and we're mostly not a very useful group at all, but nonetheless. Two, we should mention to everybody that you do get $30 free of PACER stuff per quarter. So if you only use $29, it's actually free, not just $29 free.
Right, and you should all use that every month.
Um, but third, the question of what should be free or not is really pretty complicated, and part of it is complicated because of the practical obscurity of things. There is a lot of stuff in Pacer that affects people's real lives, especially for relatively minor criminal cases, where the fact that it's not actually out there searchable on the internet is in the main a good thing for those defendants, especially the ones who are not ultimately convicted. But regardless, and the model kind of assumes that when things are elevated out of practical obscurity, fine. But for most people, for most of them, they never will be, and that's okay. I don't want to make it sound like I'm defending fees, and I don't I mean, but I think it would be very hard to transition to a free PACER system, and there's a lot of work for Congress there, and the AO would fight you tooth and nail. Um,
Well, I will just say, first of all, I don't think money is the right answer to the practical obscurity question. I think the idea that, Arnold and Porter can violate your privacy as much as it wants within and uh Seamus Hughes has to has to raise that money that he spends every year to go through Pacer dockets. It strikes me as a very suboptimal system. That said, you're right, and there has to be some means of adding friction to the privacy violation stuff. I don't know what the right solution is. I think the whatever it is, it's not um, you know, 10 cents a page.
sure. Unfortunately, though, someone has to come up with something in order to transition away from the current model. And lastly, I guess, and maybe this is just philosophical difference, I would quibble on you as to uh, the universality of things. I think it's absolutely fine for a researcher to get an exemption to go do some kind of study that would cost too much money in the economic model, but conveys real benefits to the world. And maybe that's not what your litigation tracker is. And maybe
No,
you wouldn't
no, I
qualify.
I agree with you.
Oh, well,
If
you said there
but
should be the same rules for everybody, and I'm just saying I'm comfortable with having some fee exemptions for some kinds of work.
okay, so I, I what I mean when I object to the fee object, it's fine if the AO wants to say, okay, if you're a if you're doing a project for public interest, we'll give you a free fee exemption, send an application, but then don't exclude journalists,
Uh,
right? Like
as a
the
journalist, I agree with you. Um, on the other
right,
hand,
right. But what they're actually saying is we appreciate we think academics shouldn't have to pay this, and that I think is at some level that they know law professors and they don't know I mean, I just don't really buy that. All right, we got to wrap up. John Hawkinson, fuck Rule 52C. You're a great American. And Mike Feinberg, pre-surgical Mike, as he's known, I will see you in half an hour. You, folks, can be back tomorrow. I don't know who the co-hosts are going to be. It might be an Ev Gamon day. It might not. I don't know who the guests are going to be, but I know that you'll be there and I'll be there, and it's going to be a blast.